So what exactly is the kindness campaign?
Well, that's a good question. Most people don't know what that means. So let me just try to explain it in simple terms.
Okay.
Basically, it's to teach people more pro-social behaviors and to recognize them in others. And what we know from the research of B.F. Skinner is what you pay attention to, you get more of.
Okay. What does a pro-social behavior mean?
Well, it's being able to teach people, other people with kindness and respect.
Okay. Sounds like a positive.
Yeah, it is. And I think you do a good job of modeling that behavior.
Okay. Thank you.
So actually, when I started the campaign, I'm I realized I kind of had the notion that there's a lot of acts of kindness out there that nobody recognizes. And of course, this idea with Skinner is the more you recognize something, you'll get more of it.
Yeah.
And so I thought about how do I do that? And then as a scientist, I thought, well, I also need a hypothesis,
Hmm.
you know. So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And the hypothesis turned out to be, I had to kind of hone it a little bit every now and then, but to make sure it was solid. But my hypothesis was that if I could get 20% of the people in this community wearing a button that said spread kindness, it's contagious right here, uh, and, uh, and looking for a way to pass it on to others, recognizing their acts of kindness, it would change the climate in the community.
Okay.
And so that's what I set out to prove. It was a social scientist experiment, and I wanted to make sure that it worked.
Hmm.
So that was really my initial kind of uh, foray into the kindness campaign was to basically find a way to get uh, 80,000 buttons to the
Oh
community.
my gosh, that's a lot of buttons.
Yeah, and fortunately, we had a man who owned 4 Wendy's in town, and he contributed to buying those buttons.
Okay.
And he had a Wendy's, but or had a button on every Wendy's tray when he served in his restaurants. And he really helped promote the campaign. So I was really grateful for that. So that was really the how we got to looking at what are the results of that. And I'll talk about that in a little bit
Okay.
later. I don't think anyone talking about that immediately.
What is the kindness campaign? Something that's working on creating more pro-social behavior, but specifically, what did you do?
Well, we had volunteers wearing a button
Hmm.
and looking for an opportunity to pass them on. And that worked.
Okay.
And then the instruction was if you wore your button, you then would look for an opportunity to pass your button on.
Okay. Cool.
And that worked. We got these buttons circulated in the community. And then we had to look at how is this affecting the community.
Hmm.
So that's what we'll talk about next.
Okay. So you started it where and how long did it go and what cities or towns or schools did you have this in?
94 to 2005. And it's spread to about 700 schools, not the whole. We call it the Kind and Safe Schools Initiative.
Okay.
And it was designed to change school climate. And understand, I have a really hard time with this because in 1950, James Coleman, a professor at the University of Maryland, was hired by the Department of Education to do a study about what ingredients made schools better than they are.
Hmm.
And what he came up with in a final analysis was the most important thing was to create a positive school climate.
That makes a lot of sense. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately every time I see a school shooting, I know that that person was in a school climate that was not positive.
Hmm.
And I almost weep sometimes when I see this because I know how to change that school climate.
Yeah.
And the Kind and Safe Schools Initiative does just that. It has 5 different components that, if you implemented, totally change the climate of the school.
Okay. So you worked in schools and communities,
And
or
I started in the community.
well, what did your campaign look like in the community?
Well, it was mostly with KKTV
Okay.
and the kindness line and following up on kindness stories.
What were you asking them to do?
Well, basically to follow up on the 22,000 calls they got
Okay.
and send a reporter out to do a story.
Mm-hmm.
What act of kindness was done, and then they broadcast that in there at the end of their news shows, all their news shows every day.
Those are on a lot of the national news today that have positive endings. And honestly, I look forward to that. I look forward to hearing about it. And it's inspirational to me to see what other people are doing. And it kind of inspires me to want to do the same thing. So that's what you started.
Well, what people would tell me that Ma and I, when we go to bed, we watch the news. And it's sure nice to end the news and go to bed with something positive.
No, for sure.
So I was grateful for some of the feedback I was getting from people.
Yeah.
And then another thing happened that was really interesting. The police chief, Ron Kramer, talked to me and he said, there's a perception that there's more violence in this community than there is.
That's probably true.
He said crime and violence is down about 30%, yet the perception of crime and violence in the community is that it's up 30%.
Wow.
Big gap.
Yes.
So I thought, what can we do to change that? Well, basically, and it also had an impact on the economics because people were actually afraid to go downtown at night and shop in any of the stores. So he was really very supportive of the program. And then one day I get this snail mail from him, and there's a button inside of it with a bullet hole in the middle.
Oh my gosh.
He said, your campaign's working.
Gee.
So that was a strange way to get feedback.
I guess so.
But anyway, we were able to change that perception eventually. And I'll tell you why and how we did that.
Okay. So how successful was the campaign?
Very successful. We were able to really 10 intangible ways make changes in the climate of the community. And then, of course, it spread to schools. People would say, well, can you do this in my school? Because we got a lot of bullying and put downs.
Yeah.
And I said, sure. So I'd go out and talk to the schools about what this was and how they could implement it. And then I had put together a manual with some activities. And about halfway through the year, I got these calls from schools. We run out of activities. And I said, well, okay, you have to give me some. Tell me what worked in your school and activities, and I'll put it in a manual.
Okay.
And so we ended up with over 300 activities that worked. And at the bottom of the page was who contributed. And so we were able to really reach out to schools, and I'm grateful about that because I still have this heavy heart when I see a school shooting.
Sure. So you mentioned to me one time that you had a survey that you put out about the results of your campaign. What did that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had about a year into the campaign, we had set up some research in some of the schools. And about a year into the campaign, we saw that bullying went down 30%. And in one school, when the put downs went down 90%.
Gee, that's really a great result.
It was. And I was really heartened by the results I got.
I can imagine, yes, after all that work.
So, I mean, again, just changing the school climate. And it was so simple to do. I mean, you just start to recognize more acts of kindness among the students.
What about communities? Did they ever
positive? Let me finish with schools. There's another thing I wanted to add. In one school that did the kindness campaign, the principal stood outside the door and personally greeted every student who came every day.
Yeah.
And that was an act of kindness that really had an impact.
I can imagine it makes kids really feel important.
Yeah, they did. It was
like they're worthwhile.
Yeah.
So you were talking about communities and the results that you might have had there.
Well, in communities, we had how to figure out how do you survey a community and get results. So KKTV gave me the answer. They do a viewer survey every year, I think. And I said, well, let's include some questions on the effects and the impact of the kindness campaign in this community. And so we added a couple questions, one of which it was, how much impact do you think the kindness campaign has been in reducing violence in the community? And we never mentioned violence in anything, but that was in the question. And 75% of the respondents said it was having a significant impact on reducing violence.
That must have been very satisfying to hear that.
Everybody was thrilled by that result. Yeah.
Yes.